Well, hey guys, thank you for coming to the class. We're super excited to have you here. As you probably know, we're making beautiful golden wreath with our folk art paint. So I've seen it, and I think you guys have seen it posted. So I love it, and I can't wait to see what you guys can share with us when you make it. And I see everybody here letting us know where you're viewing from. So keep doing that if you haven't. We love to see that too. And I think you guys already know this, but if you have any questions, go ahead and leave it in the chat and I will relay it to Andy if I can't answer it myself. He is the expert after all. So I think without further ado, I'll turn it over to Andy. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, guys.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. And I'm really glad that you are with us this evening. Appreciate you giving up your Monday night to be with us for our Golden Wreath class. All right, so we are going to paint this project in just about an hour. Probably less important to me than the time limit is that you learn something and you have some fun with us tonight. So this is an 8x8 canvas, and we are going to now shift to our overhead view. So if Stephen can take care of that for me, I would appreciate that. Thank you, Stephen. All right, first thing we're going to do is turn our regular canvas into a golden canvas. And for that, I used FolkArt's Treasure Gold. This is the most beautiful gold water-based paint that is available in the marketplace today. So if you wouldn't mind opening up your Treasure Gold, you can take a large flat brush and apply a coat of Treasure Gold to your canvas. Just brush it on, a nice thin even coat, and then dry it with your hair dryer or heat gun and apply a second coat so that we get a really beautiful gold canvas. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that right off the top. So go ahead and base coat your canvas with the Treasure Gold. And I did use the regular color gold in the Treasure Gold. I think it's what everybody thinks of as a really beautiful gold. Treasure Gold is also available in an antique gold, and there is an Inca gold, which is a lighter, more pale kind of champagne colored gold, but I really do love the original gold color. And I opted to do this painting on a gold canvas because I thought it just seemed a little bit more festive for the holiday season. And I am not a painter I don't usually paint very many Santas. I don't paint angels. So I always tend to do things that are a little less traditional motifs when I paint for the holidays. And I absolutely love painting a wreath with a festive red bow attached to it. So I've done this same sort of wreath, many different sizes. I've done them 12 by 12. I painted one last Christmas for my mom that was about a 20 by 20. And I liked that one so much that I did one for myself that was 24 by 24. So that's one of my favorite holiday decorations. Just love the wreath with the big red bow. And I think doing it on a gold background is a lot of fun. In fact, painting anything on Treasure Gold is a lot of fun.
I would agree. I love how Treasure Gold looks. While folks are base coating, can you hold up the finished product just for some folks who wanted to check it out before we start? Awesome.
There you go.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay. So we do have that big recording announcement on my monitor. So
I'll move it for you in just a second.
So I'm showing it the best I can here. But if you're looking up while you're base coating, I want you to notice that my bow is not beautifully painted. It's not tightly rendered. And the greenery for the wreath itself is very impressionistic. It's very loosely painted. So we are going to have a lot of fun with this. And as I always say, you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. So that way, everybody sets themselves up for enjoying what we're going to be doing, and you're not setting yourself up to have some perfect painting or what you imagine is a perfect painting. My painting is by no means perfect or anything. It's a wreath and some greenery and some little berries, and that's the impression that we're giving. And that's all there is to this. And this would be great if you wanted to do it smaller. You could size this down to a 6x6 or even a little 4x4, and you could maybe turn it into a refrigerator magnet, or you could put it on different packages that you are giving out as gift tags. Lots of different things you can do with this. And it's just a really fun, simple technique. You can get your kids involved in painting this, and everybody will enjoy it. And it's one of those things that everybody knows exactly what this is when they look at it. They know it's a wreath and a bow. What did I use to paint the background? I used FolkArt Treasure Gold. It is the most beautiful metallic gold water-based paint that you can use. It is not only metallic, it is virtually reflective. And it comes in a number of different colors, but I am using the traditional gold color of the Treasure Gold. Love this paint. So you want to give yourself 2 coats and dry it with a hairdryer in between. I'm going to give you another minute or so to do that, and then we will tackle our project. And hopefully you all are just about ready to start in with the holiday music. Now, Stephen and I were discussing holiday music and what we love and don't love. And so mercifully, we both don't love the same music. So there'll be no conflict during the holidays this year.
Andy, did you already mention what's the largest you would go with this painting? Because I heard you say going smaller, but I wasn't sure if you.
I have done this same style painting up. The one that I did for myself was a 24 by 24 canvas. So it's a big old wreath. And I used big brushes and bold stroke work, but done basically the same way. You just need to enlarge your design, and you can, we'll talk just a little bit about the circle. So what I normally do is I determine the outside circle by whether it's a dinner plate or a bowl or a to-go container or a Tupperware lid or whatever. That's how I get my outside dimension. And then I try to find a smaller lid for my inside of my wreath. So if you're doing big, you'll need a big old circle. And then your wreath will need to be much wider if you're doing a big wreath. All right, so I'm going to give you another minute to get your paint on and dry, and then we will start in with the lesson. And this is going to be a fun project, and you will hear some keywords and phrases a million times tonight. That is part of the whole shtick. So have everyone either printed out their downloadable template or is ready just to sketch their design on if they did not print out their template. Okay, so I'm going to lay my template on my canvas, and then I'm going to slip a piece of transfer paper underneath. And I just want to make sure that I can see a little bit of my line, and I'm not sure how well this is all going to work out for me, but we're going to try anyway. So I'm slipping my transfer paper under my design, and then I'm going to use a stylus, and I'm going to trace over my pattern lines just to give myself an indication of where everything is supposed to go. And then I want to lift up. And if I tip this in the light, I can see where I'm painting, and that will be harder for me, but you all will see the paint going on without any trouble. So you can go ahead and work with me, and you can transfer your design at this time. And if you want to, you can use gray transfer paper, you can use white transfer paper, whatever color is going to show up best for you. Now that I'm using this white transfer paper, I wish I'd had a nice piece of gray transfer paper, but we're going with what we have. As you remember me saying, you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. So I'm loosely going to transfer the inside of my wreath and then a little bit of the outside of the wreath, just so I have an idea about where things belong.
Andy, is there anything that you could suggest if you didn't have the paper that you have?
The transfer paper or
Yes.
the pattern?
I believe the transfer paper is what they're asking, like a substitute for it.
You could rub the back of your design with a pencil. That'll give you something that will transfer your design. But this is, the transfer paper is one of those things that you should invest in. All right, I'm going to just tip this in the light and see if drawing over this with a pencil does any good. And it doesn't really do much good at all. All right, so I'm just going to tip mine up when I need to see it. All right, so I'm going to give you another minute or so to get your design transferred to your canvas, and then we will start in earnest.
Andy, do you happen to know what kind of transfer paper you're using?
It is Sorel brand transfer paper. The brand doesn't really matter. It's more the color. Most all transfer papers are pretty much the same, I would say. So a gray transfer paper, white transfer paper. Those are the two that I use most often. The Sorel brand also comes in a yellow color. It comes in a red, which I would not recommend using. It also comes in a very bright blue color, which I would not recommend using. Those colors can tend to bleed into your paint.
And this is not the same thing as graphite paper, correct?
It is graphite paper. It is not carbon paper.
Gotcha.
Don't think you can use typewriter carbon paper. That will create the world's nastiest mess, and you will be so sorry that you tried that. So it is graphite paper or artist transfer paper. And it is not typewriter carbon.
What color, like you were talking about which colors to pick, which would you suggest, I guess?
I would have white and gray in my kit of supplies. At my desk, I have a manila folder that has my transfer paper in it, and I have white and gray in there. All right. So we are now moving on to our FolkArt Engine Red, and I'm using probably about a number 12 flat brush. And what we are going to do is we are going to paint in our bow using our Engine Red. And I'm probably going to end up giving my bow 2 coats of the Engine Red. And where my loop of my bow goes, and I'll show this to you up close so you could see, I've left what I would call a little cheat line there. So you could see that I've got the top of my loop, and then that's the back of the loop, and there's that little gap in there. So having that gap, I know where my design line is. So I'm going to continue to undercoat my bow, and you all are going to do the same thing. And we are just leaving our little cheat lines as we need to. And I'm just putting this coat on pretty quickly. And I will, in just a moment, dry this, and we will put a second coat on. So this is probably the most tedious part of the painting, is just getting our bow undercoated. But go ahead and begin to work on undercoating your bow. Don't try to cover it solidly with your first coat of paint because it probably won't cover. So just put a light coat on, knowing that we're going to dry it and brush another coat on. And my bow is a little jiggy jaggy, and that's exactly how I painted this. It's not a sweeping, flowing bow. As you can see here, these little, the tails, the ribbon tails are a little jaggedy. And I think jaggedy is the exact correct phrase for that. Okay, so our bow has 4 loops and a center knot, in case you were wondering. 3 of our loops, you can see both the front and back. There's this one over here where you can only see the front of the loop. Okay, so that's what my bow looks like once it's been given 1 coat of red. So I'm going to quickly dry this and then apply a 2nd coat, and that's what I want you to do as well. So this is just the undercoat. We are not painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel here. No need to fret and fuss over every little bit of this. We just need to get a nice coat of red on here. So work neatly and carefully, but also work as rapidly as you can. I know that some of you will always want me to slow down. And if you've painted with me before, you know that I can't slow down. I only have one teaching speed, and that is steady and always forward moving. Try not to rush you, but I also don't want you to dilly-dally. And I think many of you like to dilly-dally in your paint. And if you are feeling overly rushed and not feeling like painting along with me, that's perfectly fine. You can hang out with us tonight. And if you have questions or comments, you can relay them to Stephen. He will pass them on to me. And then when you feel more in the mood, or when you want to work at your own pace, you can definitely do that. As Yamina says, these will be posted on the Michael's the Michael's Store website in 24 hours, and then on YouTube in 48 hours.
Andy, we do have a question about, do you know if there's a difference? I'm sorry, do you notice a difference when you use a hair, like a hair dryer versus a heat gun?
Yes, the heat gun's going to be a lot hotter and will get the job done a lot faster.
All right.
You just need to make sure that you don't burn your hands or blister your paint when you're using a heat gun. Whew, done and ready for the next step. But I know that many of you are probably not done and ready for the next step. So we will let you continue to work for another minute until you are caught up or until I am ready to move on.
What size brush did you just use?
I'm using a number 12 flat.
Thank you.
If you feel comfortable, you could go ahead and use a 3/4 inch flat, which I don't think is too big for this bow. I mean, a 3/4 inch flat's going to get in there and get the job done pretty quick. But, you know, 12 or 14 is a good flat brush. All right, so I'm going to put out my dark shading color next. And you can use berry wine or black cherry. I think they're pretty similar in color. Yeah, they're very similar in color. So either one or a combination of the two will work very, very well. But still going to give you another minute to catch up. Being super generous with the time now. And come 9 o'clock Central Time or Eastern Time, you all are going to not like it when I'm moving pretty quick. But such is the life in a Michael's classroom. I'm always more about doing the project than I am about watching the clock. So some of you love that. Some of you are ready for the class to be done on time. All right, so I am ready to move on. My bow is nicely covered. I said nicely covered. It's not completely covered. Let me show you. You can still see those little bits of cheat lines there. So that's how I know where my design is. So it's nicely covered, but I can still see my my lines of where I'm going to put my shading. All right, so 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Watch your monitor. I'm going to stroke 1/2 of my brush into one of these dark reds or both of them on the same half of the brush. The other half of the brush gets nothing. I've just wiped that initial red out. All right, so I've got nice amount of color on the brush and then it fades over to nothing. So let's watch. I'm going to shade basically around the center knot. And I'm doing this by pat, 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 and dab, dab, dab this dark shading on. I'm not trying to do this in one smooth, continuous stroke of the brush. Picking up more paint as I need to, turning my canvas so it's comfortable in my hands, putting the dark next to the bow and tap, 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 and dab, 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 and we're just patting this dark color on. And I'm not trying to make my shading have just a nice swoop of color. If it's got some variety or some variation, so much the better. All right, so we're just going around the knot. Pat, 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 dab, dab, dab. All right, so there is, I've shaded around my knot. So go ahead and get working on this. And while you are doing that, if you look at your photograph or your pattern, you can see where the dark shading is indicated inside of the loops or where the tails of the ribbon go underneath the loops. So we're going to continue to apply our dark shading, which is the berry wine or the black cherry, picked up on 1/2 of the brush and nothing on the other half.
And this is, what size brush is this?
I'm still using my number 12 flat.
Okay, same one.
Yep, same one. All right, so as I'm shading inside of a loop, tap, 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 pat, 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 and we darken inside the loop just like that. Again, the black cherry and the berry wine picked up on half the brush, nothing on the other half, putting that dark color in the shaded areas of the bow. Tap, 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 dab, dab, dab. And we've shaded another loop. Tap, 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 pat, pat, pat. And I'm going to shade the tails of my ribbon where it goes underneath the loops of the bow. Tap, 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 dab, 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 pat that shading on. You need to get the shading on pretty dark on your bow. If you don't have dark shadows, you cannot have bright highlights. I think we need to needle point that on a pillow. And I'm patting some dark color on the tails of the ribbon. And then, okay, so that's what the tails of the ribbon look like with the dark color on them. And then you can substitute black cherry, or you could even use a little true burgundy if you wanted to. Somebody was asking about substitution for a color. All right, we are also going to shade, I'm going to shade the right half of the knot. So this is going to put dark color right next to dark color, and that edge of the knot is just going to disappear into darkness. All right, so there you can see my knot has been shaded on the right-hand side. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to get your ribbon shaded or your bow shaded, or your ribbon that's been tied into a bow. However you want to look at it, we're getting the red part of our painting done. So far, it's not been a lot of very difficult technique that we've done tonight. Probably the worst part of all was painting that canvas with the gold, but it's so beautifully shimmery gold. Love it.
Andy, what's a set of brushes that you would recommend for beginners?
I think the thing to do is to look for a set of brushes that are not the cheapest brushes in the store and not the most expensive brushes in the store, and something that has an assortment of different size flat brushes and a liner brush that's very, very good quality liner brush. That's what I think most beginners need to use. Once you've been painting a while, you might want to venture off into a little bit more of a specialized kind of brush, or you might want a brush that's of a bit higher quality. But just start out with something, not trying to cheap out on the quality of your brushes. Buy a set of brushes that's a pretty good quality, Like I said, they don't have to be the most expensive brush in the store, but something that's of good quality. All right, I'm going to dry this with my heat gun. I think that some people they just try to do the least expensive option every single time on every single thing. And I know from 40 years of experience that investing in good quality materials makes your experience that much better. If you try to paint on a super, super cheap canvas, that usually the canvas is probably much more coarse and it's just harder to paint on. So stepping up in the quality of your canvas is not a bad thing to do. It will make your painting better. Buying a little bit better quality paint like the FolkArt paints is going to make you a little bit better because you're not fighting against your paint. And buying a set of brushes that's of good quality will just make life easier if you wash them and take care of them. All right, I'm going to step off of my soapbox for just a moment, and I'm going to put some pure orange on my palette. I don't really like to get too preachy, but sometimes the talking about the quality of art materials is important. And I know I'm one of those students that I will spend money to get a really good product. I took a workshop from an artist a while back, and I asked her what brushes she used, and she told me what brand she used, and that she has a signature set of brushes. And I'm like, okay, well, I said, please order one of those for me to have there at the workshop. And she goes, they're kind of spendy. And I said, I need the good ones. So her little set of like 10 brushes was probably $150, but worth every cent for what I learned from her in the class. All right, so this is FolkArt's Pure Orange, and I'm taking my number 12 brush, which, as you've noticed, I've not put my brush in water or mentioned that you need to wet your brush at all tonight. So dry brush, I'm going to pick up some pure orange on my brush. And here's what I want you to do. I'm going to lay my brush parallel to the surface that I am working on. So I'm going to lay my brush down where I want my highlight to be brightest, and I'm just going to tap and pat a little bit of this orange color on. I'm not trying to blend anything. I'm laying the brush parallel to the surface and just pulling on a little bit of an orange highlight. So you could see how that highlight's on there and it's kind of broken. All right, so let's do that where we have light areas on our bow. So right next to the loop, I'm just stroking my brush in the orange and then laying the brush down and tapping it while it is virtually parallel to the surface. All right, so there's another bit of a highlight going on. We're not blending, we're not softening, we're just laying on a sparse amount of paint on our bow. Gonna highlight my knot opposite my shadow. So my shadow was on the right side. So I'm going to lay my brush down on the left side and tap, 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 not putting any weight on the brush, letting the paint come off of the brush just by the weight of the paintbrush itself. Tap, tap, tap. All right, so there's the knot highlighted. All right, let's move on to our other loops. And next to the actual loop, I'm going to set the brush down. No pressure on the brush, just tap, tap, tap. Let the weight of the brush and the paint just trail off. Sorry, I got to move this around so I can see what I'm doing. I know you all hate it when the teacher has to see what they're painting, but every now and then it's just got to happen. All right, so there is another loop that is highlighted. Got one more loop to highlight. So we're going to do that one next. Pick up a little paint, lay the brush down parallel to the surface and let the weight of the brush allow that little bit of paint to come off. And we're tap, tap, tapping, pat, pat, patting. All right, so there's another loop done. Sorry about the earthquake cam there. All right, let's do the trailers of our ribbon. We're going to highlight opposite of the shading. So if our shading's on the right side, our highlight's going to be on the left side. Tap, tap, tap. Lay the brush parallel to the surface. Tap, tap, tap. Just letting that paint trail off. I've done the top section of this, and now I'm going to do an important thing where this ribbon twists over. I'm going to tap, tap, tap some highlight on that little turn, and then let that continue around to the other side. Tap, 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 and pat, 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 a little color on there. All right, so you see that there's that orange that comes down here, follows this little turn, and then down like that. Don't think we're done with the highlighting on this because we're not quite done. But I'm going to highlight the other trailer or streamer. I don't make many bows, so I'm not sure of all of the real bow parts. Just tap, tap, tap this color on. Very light pressure. You don't want an awful lot of this paint to come off. You shouldn't have too much paint on your brush, but just tap, tap, tapping it on. All right, so there is the other little streamer done. Let me turn it right reading for you. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute or so to catch up with me. If you all have questions, you can type them in and Stephen will relay them to me. Or sometimes I can actually, what color did he use for the shading of the, I'm going to assume that's the bow. So I used either black cherry or berry wine. I actually used a combination of them, loading them both on one half of the brush. And if I'm not mistaken, it seems like Chris Williams has tuned into this. It's always nice when Chris tunes in. What other colors? Stephen, you're going to have to read that comment to me.
Sure. It says, what other colors besides orange would achieve the same results with the highlights?
Orange is going to be the one that's going to get you there the best. If you try to highlight your red with white, you're going to get a very pink looking bow. And while some people love a pink bow year round, I think a more red to red orange bow at the holidays is going to be your better bet. So if you don't have pure orange, you could use some hot saffron. You could use tangerine. You could use any other color of orange in the FolkArt paint, or you could mix some Naphthol Crimson, Apple Red, Lipstick Red, Engine Red, or whatever with a yellow, medium yellow or yellow light to make an orange color. So lots of ways you could get around that, but pure orange is going to be your best bet for what we're achieving tonight.
Andy, could you hold yours up while you're just for a second?
Yeah, sure can. Okay, we are going to turn our attention. We're not done with our bow at this point just yet, but we're going to turn our attention away from our bow and start on our wreath. So I'm going to put out some FolkArt Thicket, and I'm also going to put out some bright green. And I'm also going to put out some lime green. If you don't have these exact colors, you can use other colors. You want a dark green, a bright medium green, and then kind of a lime green or a chartreuse green, something very, very bright. Okay, and I'm going to pick up a 3/4 inch flat brush for this. You could use another number 12 brush or number 14 brush, or basically anything you've got that is a large, dry, flat brush. And I'm going to pick up a little FolkArt Thicket on my brush, and I'm going to tap, 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 and pat, pat, pat this brush on my palette. I don't want too much color in my brush. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine that I can see my pattern lines, and I'm going to begin up here on my bow, and I'm going to tap some of this dark color right next to my bow. All right, so now I'm just using the corner of my brush and I'm tapping some of this thicket right next to the bow. And I'm going to now just, I mean, this is a very awkward angle for me to hold this, but I need to tap and just kind of indicate where my wreath actually goes. So I'm just tapping some color on so I can see where the outside edges of my wreath is. Okay, now that I've done just enough of that so that I can kind of see where I'm going, I'm picking up the thicket on my brush, and I'm going to begin to use the corner of my brush, and I'm going to tap and flick from one side of the corner of the brush. And as I'm dancing this brush across, I'm creating a little bit of a base for the green part of my wreath. I'm letting lots and lots of gold show through. I'm only picking up paint when no more seems to be coming off of my brush. Very sparse amount of paint. Tap, 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 dab, dab, dab. I do not want you to fill in your wreath solidly. Nor, okay, look here on the palette. I don't want you to do this either. We're not making like little scallopy marks around our wreath either. What we're making are little marks like this. Much more nondescript marks. Okay, so that's what we're doing, going around our wreath. Down at the bottom, I'm not going to pick up very much paint because I don't really want my wreath to be very strongly or fully painted at the bottom of the canvas. I'm going to pick up paint, and I'm going to start over here on the other side of my bow and tap in some dark color. And then use the corner of my brush and tap, 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 and dab, 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 and just stretch this paint out, making sure that my wreath is around. We're going to have to hold your wreath back a little bit away from you and make sure that your wreath is round. We're not painting an avant-garde oval-shaped wreath tonight. So nicely rounded and about the same width all the way around. Important things to keep in mind. Lots of gold should be showing through this. It's a whole lot less painted than you think it is. Tapping and sweeping this color on. Hold it back, get a good look at what you've got going on. Okay, so I've got enough on mine. Holding it up so you could see that there's plenty of gold showing through. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to do this, and then we'll dry it. Okay, Diane, you wanted this up close? There you go. Okay, I'm going to give you another 30 seconds to get this dark green on our wreath. Thank you, Valerie. And I'm sure yours will look amazing. One thing I do want to let you all know is that in addition to using the hashtags Make It With Michael and Plaid Crafts, you can also hashtag your painting with the hashtag Let's Paint Challenge. No apostrophe in let's, and that's all one word. And that will have your painting show up in the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group, where I usually teach a class on Tuesday and Thursday at noon Eastern time. So you would just join our Facebook group. We love to have you all there. And we do lots and lots of painting techniques. All right, you've had your minute. Let's wipe our brush of our thicket. And the next color we're going to use is some bright green. So we're going to pick up some bright green on our brush. We're going to tap, 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 and dab, dab, dab that on our palette because we don't want too much paint on our brush. Very sparse amount of paint. And we are going to tap, 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 and dab, dab, dab some of this bright green onto our wreath. Not going too much into the shadow areas. That's these areas right up there. And I don't love this color. It's a pretty green, but it's not what I want the most of on this wreath. So you can see where I added a little bright green to this. That went on pretty quickly. So I'm going to give you a moment to do that. I don't know if you all are like most painters and crafters, this is prime time for you all. It's getting close to December. So I know many of you have turned your back on fall decoration, even though it hasn't been Thanksgiving yet, but you are turning your attention to holidays. So we are trying to get you off to a good start. All right, so I've added some licorice or black to my palette. So here's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to pick up some thicket on my brush. And I'm going to pick up a little small amount of licorice or black, and I'm going to tap, 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 and pat, 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 and dab that together till I have made just a dark green. Take some of it off on my shop towel. And I'm going to tuck a little bit of this dark green right up underneath the bow. Just dabbing it on using the corner of my brush. Put a little darker color right next to that bow. And then just a little tap, 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 and dab, dab, dab. In just a couple of places, you could see where those went on there. It's mainly from about there up, where I added some dark, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. And we're just going to tap, 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 and dab, dab, dab some of that on. Mainly using the corner of the brush and kind of sweeping from side to side.
Andy, this is Thicket that you're using?
This is Thicket plus a little black.
Gotcha.
All right, so we're just deepening a couple of little areas, not too much down toward the bottom. It's mostly up underneath the bow. So I think you all can see that pretty clearly here on the sample. We're not doing too bad for time tonight. I'm sensing that we're going to run just a little bit over because I don't want to rush you all like crazy at the last minute. So I'm fine running over just a little bit. I have to be considerate of Stephen's time and of course of your time. All right, so just another minute to add that dark in there, and I'm going to dry mine. Okay, I'm shifting now to a number 12 flat brush. This is a clean, dry brush. So it's got nothing in it, and I'm going to pick up some of my lime green, and I'm going to tap, 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 and pat, 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 and dab, dab, dab that on my palette to load my brush with a very small amount of this very light, bright green. And we are going to tap, 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 and dab, dab, dab that on in some places, adding some highlight to our wreath. Again, lots of dabbing on the corner of the brush. And there you can see some of that on there. But add a little bit more down here, because this is the lighter portion of our wreath away from the bow. Really love that this wreath is not made up of any particular kind of greenery. I'm not trying to make this a holly wreath. It's not a evergreen wreath. It's just a wreath that's made up of green dabs. So very, very forgiving. Tap, 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 and dab, dab, dab. Probably the less paint you have on the brush, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so there you can see some of my highlights on my wreath.
So Andy, I have a quick question for you that's somewhat related.
Okay.
There's a question earlier about floating medium, and basically the question was just why do you use it? Like, what's the purpose?
Well, ordinarily, and I put it on the supply list, but I didn't really use it tonight. I would have used it when we were basically side loading our brush to apply the dark shading, and it just makes that a little bit easier for most people to do. And it's It's a little easier to control than just using water. So that's why we use that floating medium from time to time. It does not extend the drying time of your paint. All right, so I think we're just about done with that. And I'm going to dry that light green. And we are going to paint our berries now. So this is where we needed a pencil with a new unused eraser. So I've got a pristine eraser here, and I'm going to load my brush with some, let's see what red I'm using. This is Engine Red. You could use Naphthol Crimson or Lipstick Red or whatever red you have. And of course, I've got a little bit of dog hair here on my palette, which I always have a little dog hair somewhere. All right, so I've loaded my brush with the Engine Red, and now I'm just putting part of the brush into some of the dark color. So I, in effect, have light and dark red on my eraser at the same time. So I'm going to set my eraser down and press, and that gives me a berry that is already shaded. I don't care that it's not completely round on the right side. That's not a problem for me. All right, I'm going to see if there's enough red on here to do a second berry without reloading. So just press firmly. There wasn't, so I'm going to wipe my eraser off. I'm going to reload and put a second berry on. Reload, that is in both reds. So you can see I'm putting these berries on. There's just not quite enough to do 2 berries with 1 brush load or 1 eraser load. I am going to do one down here. All right, you can see this one at the bottom. It's pretty transparent. That's perfect. I'm not going to paint any more on that one. We're just going to leave that there. Anybody who's looking can see that there's a berry there. Let's put one up here. Then I'll come back down here and see if I can just apply one. That looks okay down there at the bottom. See, it's not much paint on it, but it's obvious that there's a berry there if anybody's looking at your painting. So again, with the Engine Red and some of the berry wine or black cherry. Another one up there. And then I think we need another one in this kind of middle area over here. Just not quite enough paint on my eraser. I would rather have too little paint than too much paint on these berries. And so I'm going to wipe my eraser off, and I'm just going to go back over these berries and just give a little twist. And if that lifts off some of the paint, so be it. We are, in fact, just taking a little bit of the extra paint off. So we've kind of erased a little paint from our berries. These don't need to be too defined. All right, we have 2 more things to do. So I'm going to take, you can use a little yellow. I didn't actually put yellow on your supply list, but any yellow will work. And I didn't put white on your supply list, which is typical of me to leave something off. So a little tiny dab of white is all you're going to need. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit of my red and a little bit of my white, and I am going to make a kind of a pinkish color. And then add a bit of yellow to it. And I'm going to thin this down with some water. So any yellow your red and a little bit of white. So we're just making a thin puddle of kind of a peachy pinky color. All right, and then you can take the point of your pencil. You can pick up a little bit of this kind of pinky color, and I'm going to put a little dot of a highlight on my berries. I did not want this color to be a bright white highlight. So this little pinky color is just what the doctor ordered. I'll get mine put on all of my berries, one little dot. Okay, let me show you the little highlights on the berries. That really just finishes those berries off. So we've gone super crafty tonight. I don't normally go that crafty, but we've used an eraser and a pencil point. So we have one final thing to do to our bow. So if you want to, this is optional. You can be done with it if you want to, but I'm going to take some pure orange and I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow into it just to lighten that orange a little bit. And I'm going to use my palette knife. And I know some of you love the palette knife and some of you hate the palette knife. If you love the palette knife, I'm loading it with a very sparse amount of paint. Just tap, 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 dab, dab, dab. And I'm going to go over some of my highlights on my bow. So put my palette knife flat down parallel to the surface of the canvas and just rub a little bit of the orange on. So there you can see how dramatic that put that lighter highlight on the knot. So we're going to do that on this loop of the bow. Just like that, touch it on and drag it back a little bit. This just heightens the highlighting on the bow. And I think really adds a dramatic finish to the painting. Right, so there you can see where I've highlighted it on there. I love this kind of highlighting on this bow. It's easy to do if you don't have too much paint on your palette knife. Less paint is better. All right, there's another section done. And then we're going to put a little bit on our streamer.
And Andy, would you mind saying what colors these are again one more time?
Sure, this is pure orange plus just a little yellow. Doesn't matter what yellow you want to mix in, but it's just a little bit of yellow mixed into the pure orange. So we've lightened our orange color that we put on initially. Right, so there it is highlighted down one streamer, and we're going to do the other streamer. Okay, so this is what my bow looks like now with those extra palette knife highlights on there. So if you want to add that, you certainly can. If you hate the palette knife, you don't have to add it. I think it really adds quite a bit to the painting and makes it just a little bit more dramatic. So do we have any final questions, Stephen?
I think we are caught up for the most part. I wanted to share this comment with you though. Jennifer says it reminds me of Caroline Zimmerman when she paints on linen.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if you knew who that was, but
who she is. We've done a lot of painting on linen. But Michaels doesn't carry the kind of linen canvas that I am used to using. So I thought painting on a treasure gold canvas would be a nice thing to do tonight. So I hope that you all have enjoyed this. And so this wraps up our golden wreath. So remember to use your hashtags that have been put in the comments to use. Somebody's asking about the top of the canvas. All right, so I painted my edges of my canvas with the treasure gold. So I think that finishes it off really, really well. So use your hashtags, make it with Michaels, Plaid Crafts, Let's Paint Challenge.
And then Andy, would you suggest sealing this?
Yes, I would seal this with a high gloss spray varnish. I think that really it will liven up your colors and it just makes it look really, really finished off. It's a very professional way to wrap up your painting. Always give your painting a coat of varnish when you are done. It seals and protects your paintings. And I think this is a really fun way to kick off painting for the holiday season. So I'd like to thank Michaels, Amena. Thank you all for being with us tonight. I appreciate your time and hopefully you enjoyed this. And thank you very much, Stephen, for moderating.
Absolutely.
So until we are together next time, keep painting, everybody. Bye-bye.